Why was everyone staring? Maybe it was the dust, or maybe it was her. The air up here tasted like iron and ice, thin, sharp, alive with altitude. It carried the sound of men's boots crunching against gravel, the distant whine of turbines, and the restless whisper of wind slicing across the basin. Task Force Talon moved like ghosts among the ridgelines, men built from endurance and arrogance, their confidence sharpened by years of combat. They weren't used to strangers, especially not strangers like her. Sergeant Anna Sharma stepped into the forward operating base just as the morning light fractured over the peaks. She was smaller than they expected, lean, wiry, the kind of body that didn't waste an ounce of motion. Not young either. There were lines at the corners of her eyes, the kind that came from squinting through scopes under too many suns. She walked with quiet certainty, carrying a rifle case that looked like it had lived a harder life than most men on base. Corporal Davis, the unit's golden boy, watched her from near the quartermaster's tent. His smirk came easy. "They send us a den, mother," he murmured. His spotter, Chun, didn't reply, just adjusted his cap and grunted. "She's on the roster," Chun said finally. "Yeah," Davis leaned against the post, eyes glinting. "Specialist in what? Baking." No one laughed. The joke didn't need an audience. It was the kind that lived in silence, that quiet judgment soldiers traded when they saw something that didn't fit. Anna didn't look up, didn't react. She just signed the forms, took her billet number, and walked away. The words, the smirks, the condescension, they didn't even touch her. It wasn't arrogance, it was something else. A kind of stillness that made the others uneasy. She found her corner, a small slab of concrete walled off by stacked HESCO barriers. Her rifle case landed on it with a heavy metallic thud. The men around her gave her space. Not out of respect, not yet, but out of discomfort. She unlatched the case. Inside, the weapon gleamed like an artifact from another age, a Macmillan TAC-50, scarred, modified, loved. Its stock was smooth where her cheek had rested 1,000 times before. Its barrel bore the faint discoloration of long service. The scope, an old Schmidt and Bender, sat on a mount she'd clearly built herself. Every piece was tuned to her, the way a pianist might tune a grand piano before a performance only she could play. Davis approached, curiosity hidden behind mockery. "That's a heavy piece of kit, Sergeant. You sure you don't need a hand carrying it to the overlook?" The tone was friendly enough, but the poison underneath was impossible to miss. She looked up. Her eyes were deep brown, but there was nothing soft in them, only a clarity that made him blink. Then she looked back down and kept working. Silence, heavier than any insult, filled the air. She wiped the bolt with a soft cloth, checked the torque on the scope rings, aligned the barrel. Each motion was deliberate, ritualistic. She was in her world now, and the noise around her no longer existed. For the first time, Davis didn't know what to say. The men of Talon drifted closer, pretending to busy themselves while their eyes kept finding her. Something about her calm made them uneasy. She wasn't trying to prove anything, and maybe that was what made her dangerous. Hours later, the wind picked up, and with it came a voice that could still a room. "Gentlemen," said General Marcus Thorne. He was a mountain of a man carved from the same rock that surrounded the base. His uniform immaculate, his eyes sharp, his medals catching the dim light of the holographic table beside him. When he spoke, men straightened instinctively. Task Force Talon stood in a semicircle, silent, waiting. The holographic map flickered to life. The terrain glowed in shades of blue and gold. Mountains rose like frozen waves, and deep in one of those folds, clinging to a cliff face, was their target. "Kalen," Thorne said, "warlord, arms broker, parasite." He tapped a glowing point on the map. "For 6 months, he's been operating out of a monastery cut into the eastern face of that mountain. The locals call it the Gnat's Tooth. He thinks he's untouchable. We're going to prove him wrong." A red circle appeared on the map, a small balcony jutting from the cliff. Intel says he takes his tea here every morning at 600. That's our only window. He zoomed out. A faint white line stretched from their position across the canyon to the monastery. Distance, 2,250 meters. He paused. Elevation difference, negligible. Conditions, he exhaled. Nightmarish. Sustained crosswinds 30 to 50 knots. Air densities 82% of sea level. You'll be fighting physics itself. He turned to Davis. You're our best shot, can you make it? Davis straightened, pride swelling. It's a low percentage shot, sir, but possible with good data. Thorne's jaw tightened. Luck is not a strategy, Corporal. He scanned the room again, then stopped. His gaze froze on Anna Sharma. Captain Rostova, he said, his voice low. Who is this? Rostova's tone was careful. Sergeant Anna Sharma, sir, specialist detachment from SACOM, high-altitude precision shooter. The general looked her over slowly, his expression tightening with every second. Her small frame, her quiet stance, her calm. He turned back to the map, voice rising slightly, not toward her but about her. This shot isn't about aim, he said. It's about anchoring a 25-pound rifle against hurricane winds. It takes brute strength, endurance, stability. His tone hardened. No woman can make that shot. The words landed like a stone, dropped in still water. Even the hum of the holographic table seemed to fade. Captain Rostova's jaw flexed, but she said nothing. Davis looked proud. The others shifted uneasily, caught between loyalty and discomfort. Anna didn't move, didn't blink. Her eyes remained on the map, watching the wind vectors swirl in thin red lines. She wasn't listening to him. She was listening to the mountain. Inside her mind, the calculation had already begun: temperature, altitude, wind direction, bullet drift, time of flight. She saw numbers, felt them, lived them. The general's dismissal was just another sound to filter out. And if he'd looked closely, he might have seen it, the faintest tilt of her head, the smallest nod to herself. Not to him. Not to anyone. To the challenge. 2 hours before dawn, they began the ascent. The climb was brutal. Rocks cut into their gloves and the thin air burned their lungs raw. The men grunted, cursed, leaned on each other for balance. Anna didn't. Her movements were smooth, her breathing controlled, every step deliberate. The rifle on her back looked impossibly heavy, but she carried it as if it belonged there, as if the mountain itself had shaped her to fit its path. Davis, struggling behind her, glared as she passed him without a word. He tried to match her pace, but the air seemed to thicken just for him. By the time they reached the ledge, the horizon was a thin smear of silver. It wasn't much of a ledge, just a narrow shelf of rock jutting into a roaring abyss. Below, the canyon howled with invisible violence. The wind tore at their clothes, clawed at their faces, screamed in their ears. Chun set up the spotting scope, his hands steady, his jaw tight. "Wind's shifting," he muttered. "Coming up the canyon floor. We're gonna get sheer at mid-range. Mirage'll be hell once the sun hits." Davis unpacked his rifle, sleek carbon fiber, polished. It looked perfect. It looked fragile. He planted his feet, dropped prone, and locked the bipod. "Jesus," he breathed as a gust nearly lifted him off the rock. "This is worse than forecast." "Welcome to the gods' playground," Chun replied. Through the radio, Captain Rostova's voice cut through the static. "Stand by, Overwatch. Drone confirms target movement. He's approaching the balcony." Every breath grew heavy. The world shrank to the view through the scope. Kalen appeared, a small figure in flowing robes, a porcelain teacup in hand, framed by the jagged stone of the balcony. "Range, 2,250 meters, Chun reported. Wind, 35 knots, full value from 9 o'clock. Downdraft at 1,000, updraft near the target. It's a damn blender." "Give me a hold," Davis barked. 10 mils left, 2 up, Chun called, uncertain. But that's a guess, be ready to adjust. Davis drew a long breath. His finger trembled on the trigger. He fired. The shot vanished into the wind. They watched the vapor trail corkscrew wildly, dragged sideways by unseen forces. The bullet hit the cliff face 15 meters left of target, a puff of stone dust. Kalen flinched, then froze, confused, still alive. "Miss," Chun muttered. "Adjust for wind," came Rustova's voice. "I am adjusting," Davis snapped, rage creeping into his tone. He cycled the bolt, eyes wild. "Try 12 left, 3 up," Chun said. "Fire on my mark." Kalen turned, retreating toward the doorway. "Take the shot," Thorne's voice thundered through the comms. "Mark," Chun called. Davis fired again. The bullet veered high and right. The warlord vanished through the door. "Target gone," the drone operator reported. "Mission compromised." Davis slammed his fist against the stone, shouting over the wind. "The wind's impossible. No one could make that shot." The canyon answered with laughter, a low, merciless howl that drowned everything else. Then a sound. A quiet click. Anna's rifle case. Every head turned. She was already moving, slow, deliberate, unshaken. She didn't look at Davis, didn't look at anyone, just unlatched the case, lifted the heavy rifle, and laid it down on the stone. The wind tugged at her hair, but she moved as if she didn't feel it. Davis's voice cracked. "It's over, he's gone." She didn't reply. She looked at Chun, one silent glance a question. He hesitated, then nodded once. Captain Rustova's voice came over comms, low but decisive. "Stand down, Davis. Let her work." Anna lowered herself behind the rifle. Her breathing slowed. The wind roared. But inside her, there was only stillness. What was she waiting for? The world seemed to hold its breath. The men crouched behind her, eyes wide, caught between disbelief and a strange, wordless awe. The wind howled like a living thing screaming through the canyon, but around her there was silence. Sergeant Anna Sharma pressed her cheek against the rifle's worn stock. Her body melded into the rock as though the mountain itself was holding her steady. Her breathing slowed, then slower still. The chaos of the wind was deafening, but she wasn't listening to noise anymore. She was reading it. Through the lens, the world became numbers and movement. Dust spiraling along the opposite cliff face. The twitch of a prayer flag near the balcony. The tremor of heat mirage rising in thin, invisible ribbons. Each was a syllable in a language few could ever understand. "Range unchanged," Chun whispered, eyes fixed on the spotting scope. "But intel says the target's moving, heading toward the bunker. He'll cross a 30-foot open bridge. You'll have 10 seconds, maybe less." No response, no hesitation. Her finger rested on the trigger. "Wind 35 knots cross," Chun said, barely audible. "Full value." The comms crackled. General Thorne's voice came through, tight with disbelief. "Is she engaging? Does she even have a shot?" Davis muttered under his breath, "She's wasting time." But Chun didn't answer either of them. His eyes stayed locked to the scope, his pulse matching the mountain's heartbeat. 5 seconds passed, then 6. Through Anna's scope, Kalen appeared, a dark shape moving briskly across the bridge, his robe flapping like a flag in the wind. The bridge itself swayed with every gust. Her left eye stayed open, reading the world beyond the reticle. Her right eye behind the glass focused on one thing, the impossible. She could feel every current, every swirl of air between her and him. 1,000 invisible rivers twisting, colliding, tearing apart. She breathed out half a lungful. And then she stopped. Complete stillness. Inside her mind, time slowed. The sound of wind softened, fading to a low, distant hum. There a flicker in the mirage 1,000 meters out. A brief, perfect seam in the chaos. That was the path. Not now, but where the air would be when her bullet passed through it. 3 seconds of flight. A lifetime of precision. The trigger broke cleanly. The sound of the shot was swallowed by the wind. Only a faint metallic echo lingered, like a whisper of thunder too far to matter. Then silence. Chun watched through his glass. Impact in 3, 2. Kalen mid-stride folded. No flinch, no stagger, just gone. The body crumpled in a heap at the center of the bridge, the teacup still clutched in one rigid hand. Chun exhaled, hit center mass perfect. No one spoke, the world itself seemed stunned. Even Davis, who had mocked her from the start, sat frozen, mouth slightly open, the words trapped somewhere between disbelief and shame. She didn't move, didn't smile, didn't look up. Her hand worked the bolt, one smooth, fluid motion, a new round chambered. Target down, kill confirmed, the drone operator said over comms, his voice shaking. A pause then. Wait, secondary target moving, it's his lieutenant. He's dragging the body, trying to cross the bridge. Rostova's voice cut in sharp. Sharma, can you? She didn't finish. Anna was already tracking. The man on the bridge stumbled under Kalen's weight, weaving erratically, fighting the same wind that had mocked Davis's bullets. A moving target. At 2,250 meters. In hurricane wind. It was, by every known measure, impossible. And yet she adjusted. Her rifle shifted slightly, following the unpredictable rhythm of the lieutenant's movement. Her lead changed with every step. It wasn't calculation anymore. It was instinct, the kind born from 1,000 unseen failures, a lifetime of discipline. She squeezed the trigger. The second shot was even quieter than the first. 3 seconds later, Chun whispered, "My God." The man's legs buckled. He fell forward, collapsing over Kalen's body, two figures locked forever in the dust and wind. 2 shots. 2 kills. 2 impossibilities. 15 seconds apart. The radio was silent. No one dared to speak. Even the mountain seemed to pause in reverence. Davis stared, pale, trembling, the edges of his pride burning away under the weight of truth. Anna slowly sat up, exhaled, and looked down the scope one last time, not at her targets but at the canyon. The wind was still howling, but now it sounded different. Like respect. In the command tent below, screens glowed blue in the dim light. The drone feed showed 2 still bodies on a stone bridge. No one moved. No one breathed. General Thorne stood frozen before the projection. His eyes, hard as granite, now reflected disbelief. "Overwatch," he said finally, his voice rough. "Identify the shooter." Captain Rostova keyed her mic. "That was Sergeant Sharma, sir." The silence that followed could have lasted a minute or an hour. Then Thorne's voice again, quieter, uncertain. "Patch me through to Colonel Vance at Sachem." Comms clicked. A faint, distant voice answered. "Vance, Thorne here. Affirmative, primary and secondary targets are down. Yes, the asset your division sent. She just made 2 consecutive shots at 2250. Second shot on a moving target. No, I'm not drunk. I'm watching the feed." He paused, the color drained slightly from his face. "You said she was good. You didn't say she was that." A voice murmured back, too faint for anyone to hear clearly. Thorne straightened. "Understood. Copy that, Colonel. Kestrel, I see." He disconnected. That word, Kestrel, lingered like a ghost in the tent. Davis blinked. Wait, what did he just call her? Chun looked at him, his voice dropped to a whisper. Kestrel. The name meant something. Something whispered in firelight among operators who'd seen too much. The sniper of Zagros, the one who'd made the shot no one believed, the ghost no one could confirm existed. Every man who'd ever heard the story had assumed Kestrel was a myth or a man. But there she was, sitting on a ledge of rock, calm, cleaning her rifle like it was an old friend. A living legend who never asked to be known. The hike back down was slow. No one spoke. Davis followed behind her, eyes locked on her back. The rhythmic movement of her pack, the slight sway of the rifle barrel, each step was a lesson in humility. He thought of the words he'd said when she arrived. The jokes, the arrogance. And now, the silence felt heavier than the wind itself. They reached the base as the afternoon light fractured into gold and gray. General Thorne was waiting near the landing pad, his posture rigid, his face unreadable. When Captain Rostova called the team to attention, he didn't look at any of them, not Chun, not Davis. His gaze went straight to her. He dismissed the others with a simple nod. Only she stayed. They stood alone in the biting wind, two silhouettes against the vast, cold sky, a general who had built his life on certainty, and a woman who had quietly rewritten it. Thorne's jaw worked, but for once words failed him. And then he did something no one could have expected. He raised his hand. A salute. Not the quick, perfunctory gesture of rank, but a slow, deliberate motion of respect. A general saluting a sergeant. The entire base seemed to stop. Mechanics froze mid-step. Guards straightened in their towers. Even the wind quieted as if unwilling to intrude. Anna looked at him. For the first time, something flickered in her eyes, not pride, not surprise, but quiet acknowledgement. She raised her hand, returned the salute, crisp, perfect, precise. Two soldiers. Two different worlds. One truth. Respect isn't given. It's earned in silence. Thorne lowered his arm slowly. His voice came low, gravelly. Your reputation, he said, doesn't do you justice, Sergeant. She replied softly, I'm just here to do a job, sir. He nodded once, then turned and walked away. That night the wind never stopped. The mountains swallowed the sun, leaving the sky scattered with cold, merciless stars. The temperature fell hard, the air crisp and biting. Most soldiers huddled in the mess hall, the sound of laughter and music muffled through thin walls. But Anna Sharma sat outside, alone. On the edge of the perimeter wall, she cleaned her rifle beneath the indifferent glow of the moon. Her hands moved slowly, reverently. The ritual of maintenance, her meditation. Each part was stripped, wiped, oiled. Each piece returned to its place with precision that bordered on grace. Then she reached into a small leather pouch at her belt. Two shell casings, brass, dull under the moonlight. The echoes of the impossible. She held them in her palm, thumb brushing their ridged surfaces. 2 moments of perfection that had come at the price of 2 lives. She began to polish them gently with a cloth, slow circles that caught the light. There was no triumph in her movements, no satisfaction. Only ritual. Only understanding. The act was not about victory, it was about respect. Each casing was a story, and she was giving it the dignity of silence. A soft crunch of gravel behind her. She didn't turn. She already knew the sound. Sergeant Chun. He stopped beside her, his breath fogging in the cold. For a long while they said nothing. Just stood there, 2 silhouettes staring into the endless black canyon. Then he spoke, voice low, almost lost to the wind. Tea. She looked down. In his gloved hand a metal mug, steam curling into the air. He offered it wordlessly. From my sister, Taipei. Anna accepted. The warmth seeped into her fingers, the aroma of oolong rising with the steam. She gave him a small nod. No words needed. They stood together, sipping in silence. The canyon wind howled. The stars shimmered cold and far away. When she finished, she looked at the first polished casing in her hand. It shone faintly, like gold caught in starlight. She placed it back into the pouch, began on the second. Chun said nothing more. He didn't need to. Some moments don't need conversation. Just presence. Just understanding. The legend of Kestrel would spread again, whispered through tents and bases, carried by men who had seen the impossible. But she wouldn't hear it. She didn't chase glory, she didn't chase belief. She chased silence, that fragile stillness before a trigger breaks. That was her truth. That was her peace. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. How does someone become a legend who never wanted to be one? The men at the base would whisper her name, Kestrel, in tones they didn't understand. But they didn't know where it came from. They didn't know why. Anna Sharma sat alone in the armory the next morning, stripping her rifle down piece by piece, the smell of oil and brass thick in the air. Her hands moved automatically, but her mind, it wasn't here. It was somewhere else. Somewhere colder. Somewhere quieter. Zagros Mountains. Years ago. Before she was a ghost. Before she stopped believing in luck. The memory came in flashes, soundless, fragmented. A storm. A ridge that felt more like the edge of the world than a battlefield. The wind screaming hard enough to shake the soul. And then the voice of her old spotter, Lieutenant Karim Rafik, crackling through her headset. "You sure about this angle?" he'd asked, his tone strained but trusting. She'd smiled then, a rare thing even back then. "You taught me to trust the wind." "Yeah," he'd replied, "but the wind's a liar." A pause, then laughter, a sound she hadn't heard in years. That was the last time she ever heard his voice. The target in Zagros wasn't a warlord. It was a convoy, 8 vehicles, moving through a canyon in the snow, a hostage inside the lead truck. Anna's orders were simple. Stop them. By any means. But the storm came early. The wind was chaos, visibility near zero, communications failing. Her team had argued, begged her to wait. She didn't. Somewhere between calculation and instinct, she'd found a seam in the snowstorm. A space where the world made sense for a heartbeat. And she fired. The bullet tore through the windshield of a moving vehicle at 2,000 meters. The convoy stopped. But the storm didn't. The return fire came like thunder. Her team didn't make it off that ridge. When the snow settled, the hostage was alive. Everyone else was gone. When the rescue crew found her, she was kneeling beside her rifle, eyes open, silent, her gloved hands frozen to the stock. No one knew how long she'd been sitting there, listening to the wind. After that, her name disappeared from the roster. Her file sealed. Her reputation myth. Kestrel, the brass called her. Because she hunted from the sky and vanished into it. Because no one ever saw her coming. A loud clang brought her back to the present. The rifle's bolt slipped from her hand, hit the table and spun. She blinked, looked down. The smell of oil filled her lungs again. The sound of soldiers outside, the laughter, the hum of engines. And still, that wind lived somewhere in her bones. She picked up the bolt, examined it in the light. Perfect, smooth, functional. Like her. She reassembled the weapon, each piece sliding back into place like a puzzle she'd solved 1,000 times before. That was the thing about the past. You couldn't clean it away. You could only make sure it kept working. When she stepped out into the daylight, Captain Rostova was waiting. The captain stood near the vehicles, arms crossed, her sharp blue eyes softened by something unfamiliar. "Sergeant," Rostova called. Anna paused. "Ma'am." Rostova hesitated, a rare thing. "General Thorne wants to see you." Anna nodded, no surprise, she'd been expecting this. As they walked toward the command tent, Rostova said quietly, "You know what's funny? I've served under Thorne 6 years. Never seen him salute anyone below colonel before yesterday." Anna didn't reply. Rostova gave a small smile. You made him think, Sharma. That's rarer than a sunny day out here. The flap of the tent opened. Inside, Thorne stood alone. The holographic map was off. The light was real, sharp and golden, slanting through the open panels. He turned slowly, his expression unreadable. Sergeant. She stood at attention. Sir. He studied her in silence. His eyes traced the faint lines of exhaustion around hers, the steady way she held herself. Finally he said, I owe you an apology. Anna said nothing. I was wrong, Thorne continued, voice heavy. You didn't just complete the mission. You did the impossible twice. In conditions that, he exhaled sharply, shaking his head, conditions that would make any sane man call off the shot. She looked at him then, not coldly, not proudly, just steady. With respect, sir, physics doesn't care about pride. That made him pause, his lips almost twitched. No, I suppose it doesn't. He gestured to the chair beside him. Sit. She did. For a moment neither spoke. The tent flaps fluttered. Somewhere outside, a helicopter's rotors thumped faintly, distant thunder. Then Thorne said, Sackham doesn't talk about you. They've scrubbed half your record. I know, she replied simply. Why? Because it's easier to hide ghosts than explain them. He frowned, Zagreus. She nodded once. His face hardened with recognition. That was you. The storm took the rest of the team, she said. The mission didn't. Thorne leaned back, jaw tight. They called that operation a miracle. It wasn't, she said quietly. It was math. The simplicity of her answer hit harder than any speech could have. Thorne rubbed his temple, exhaling through his nose. You know, I built my career on believing in men, in their strength, their endurance, their will. I thought that's what defined a soldier. And now, he looked at her, now I think I mistook noise for discipline. Silence. Then Anna said softly, sometimes the quiet ones are just listening. He nodded slowly. I misjudged you. Most people do, she said, her tone without bitterness. Thorne's eyes drifted toward the distant mountains where the mission had taken place. What you did up there, he hesitated. It changes things. For who? She asked. He looked at her, realizing the weight of what she meant. You don't want a medal. No, sir. Why? She folded her hands, her voice low. Because medals rust and legends rot. There was no defiance in it, just truth. Thorne sat back. For the first time in years, he felt something he didn't recognize. Humility. You know, he said slowly, you remind me of someone I served with a long time ago. A man who once told me the hardest part of command isn't the weight of decisions. It's learning when to shut up and listen to the wind. Anna gave a faint nod. He was right. When she stood to leave, Thorne said one last thing. The men respect you now. I don't need them to. He raised an eyebrow. I just need them to shoot straight, she said. And with that, she turned and walked out into the wind. Outside, Davis stood near the vehicles, waiting. He looked different now. The swagger was gone. What remained was a young man with too much pride and not enough peace. When Anna passed, he straightened. Sergeant. She paused. I just wanted to say, he stopped, his throat tight. Yesterday that was something I'll never forget. She regarded him quietly. He swallowed. You made it look easy. It was. He nodded, looking down. I know. She studied him for a moment, then said, You've got good hands, but you don't trust them. His head snapped up. Ma'am. You listened to the wind, but not yourself. That's why you missed. He looked stunned. You make it sound like the wind talks. She gave the smallest smile. It does. Most people just don't know how to listen. Davis exhaled, half a laugh, half disbelief. You're not what I expected, Sergeant. Neither was the wind. Then she walked away, leaving him with that quiet, knowing thought, the kind that doesn't fade, only grows heavier with understanding. That evening, the mountains turned crimson under the dying sun. The whole base seemed softer, slower. Even the wind's fury felt distant, tired. Anna sat alone again near the wall, sipping tea from the same dented mug Chun had given her. The steam curled upward, mingling with the cold air. Her rifle lay beside her, clean and silent. Across the yard, she could see Thorne speaking to Rostova, his voice calm, his shoulders less rigid than usual. And for the first time in years, Anna felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel. Peace. Not the kind that comes from safety. The kind that comes from acceptance. The mountain had tested her again, and she had survived. Not for glory, not for revenge, but for truth. Because sometimes truth doesn't roar. It whispers through the wind, through the silence, through the weight of what we carry and what we never say aloud. And Anna Sharma, Kestrel, had built her entire life on listening. But far beyond the mountains, someone else was listening too. A voice on a secure line. A man in a dark room, reviewing the drone footage, watching her stillness, her precision. He leaned forward, his tone sharp. That's her. The intelligence officer beside him nodded. Confirmed, Sharma, call Kestrel, she's alive. The man in the shadows smiled faintly. Well, isn't that interesting? What changes a soldier first, the battles they fight or the people who watch them fight? No one at Task Force Talon could answer that. But ever since that morning on the ridge, nothing at the base sounded the same. The laughter at the mess was quieter now, not from fear, but from reflection. The men looked up when she walked past, not with skepticism, but with the uncertain respect that comes when myth becomes real. Even Davis, once the loudest voice in any room, had stopped talking so much. He practiced more, stayed later at the range. And when he cleaned his rifle, he did it the way she did, slow, deliberate, as though the weapon could sense intention. Chun noticed the change first. She didn't just hit a target, he said quietly one evening, watching Davis check wind charts. She hit our pride. Captain Rostova gave a faint smile. Sometimes that's the only thing worth aiming at. The general didn't speak of it publicly, but people noticed the way he carried himself around her, not like a superior officer, but like a man who'd finally found something stronger than command. And Anna. She remained what she'd always been, quiet, precise, present. No celebration. No stories. Just work. The mountains had a way of swallowing time. Days blurred together, dawn drills, patrol briefings, target tracking. Yet beneath the surface, something unseen was stirring. It began with the comms officer, late one night. Static crackled through the tent as he picked up an encrypted transmission from command, a string of coordinates, flagged urgent. He hesitated, frowned, then brought it to General Thorne. The coordinates pointed to an old site on the edge of the borderlands. A ghost zone. The kind of place even maps had given up on. Morning. Anna was in the armory again, checking the zero on her rifle, when Thorne appeared in the doorway. He didn't knock, he didn't need to. Sergeant, he said. Sir. Walk with me. She followed him outside. The sun was climbing over the ridge, its light cutting long shadows across the base. Helicopters stirred on their pads, crews moving like clockwork. Thorne's hands were behind his back, the posture of a man holding too much inside. We've got a situation, he said finally. Classified, you're going to be briefed with a small detachment. Anna's tone was neutral. What kind of situation? Thorne stopped walking. You remember Zagreus. Her chest tightened, a subtle, invisible motion. I never forgot it. Then you'll understand why this matters, he said. A splinter group we thought died with that convoy didn't. They've resurfaced. He handed her a tablet. A satellite image flickered on screen, snow, stone, smoke. A camp tucked deep in the ravine. They're calling themselves the Remnant, Thorne continued. Intel suggests they've recovered tech from the old operation, comms encryption, targeting data, the same systems used during the Zagreus rescue. She frowned. Those systems were destroyed. Apparently not all of them. He turned, his voice dropping. They're using your ballistics algorithms, your signature. She looked up sharply. That's impossible. Nothing's impossible anymore, he said quietly. There was a beat of silence, heavy and sharp as the air itself. When do we leave? She asked. Tomorrow, Thorne said. Team of 4, you Captain Rostova, Chun, and Davis. Davis, she echoed. Thorne nodded. He requested it. She said nothing, but the faintest shadow of surprise passed across her face. Sergeant, Thorne added, I won't insult you by giving you orders on how to do what you do, but this one, he hesitated. This one's personal. Don't let that cloud your judgment. She met his gaze, unblinking. Personal doesn't mean emotional, sir. He gave a short nod. Good, dismissed. That night Anna lay awake in her bunk, staring at the dark ceiling. The wind rattled the thin metal walls, whispering like a voice she thought she'd buried years ago. Zagreus. She could see it still, the snow, the blood, the way Rafik had smiled before the storm took him. His last words, you taught me to trust the wind. And then silence. She turned onto her side, eyes open, unblinking. The sound of the mountain outside was endless, familiar, almost comforting. Maybe that's why she never left this life. The noise of it, the danger, the chaos, was quieter than the past. At dawn, the base hummed with preparation. 4 figures stood near the transport VTOL, gear loaded, weapons checked. Rostova calm, efficient, every inch the officer. Chun stoic as always, his eyes shadowed but alert. Davis, younger, sharper, his arrogance finally tempered into discipline. And Anna silent, steady, eyes fixed on the ridgeline. As the rotors spun up, Rostova leaned toward her. You good? Anna adjusted her glove. Always. Rostova smirked. You ever get nervous? Anna's voice was soft. Only when people start asking that question. The captain laughed, a small human sound amid the roar of engines. They lifted off, the base shrinking beneath them into a blur of steel and dust. Below, the land stretched into an ocean of rock and shadow. The peaks caught the rising light, their tips glowing like embers. Davis sat across from her, helmet off, eyes thoughtful. He wanted to speak, she could tell, but he didn't, not yet. Instead, he just studied her rifle, the old, scarred TAC-50 lying across her knees. Finally, he said, why keep using that thing? You could have had any system you wanted. She looked up, her voice calm. Because I don't need to trust a rifle. I need a rifle that trusts me. He frowned. I don't follow. She adjusted the bolt slightly, the sound crisp. Every weapon has memory. You treat it right, it remembers. You rush it, it remembers that too. Chun glanced over from the opposite seat, a faint grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. She's not talking about the rifle, Davis. Davis gave a small, embarrassed laugh. Right, guess not. The conversation ended there, but the thought lingered. The flight took an hour. They touched down on a barren ridge, overlooking a frozen valley. Rostova checked her GPS. The target site's 5 clicks east, elevation drop of about 400 meters. We'll move on foot from here. No aerial support once we're below the radar line. Anna scanned the horizon. The wind here was different, colder, more brittle. She could almost smell the memory. The mountains whispered, and she listened. They began their descent in silence. The crunch of boots on rock was the only sound. Davis carried the spotter scope this time, moving with deliberate care. His earlier swagger had given way to something else, respect, maybe even fear of doing wrong in front of her. Halfway down, he asked quietly, what was Zagreus like? Chun shot him a warning look. But Anna's voice came evenly, without emotion. Cold, wind strong enough to move bullets sideways. We had 6 men on the ridge, only one left it. Davis slowed, realizing what that meant. She didn't elaborate, didn't need to. The wind filled the silence. After a while, Chun said softly, "That's where she earned her name." "Kestrel?" Davis asked. Chun nodded. "The bird that hovers in the storm waits for the perfect moment to strike. She doesn't chase. She doesn't panic, she just waits." Davis looked at Anna, walking ahead of them. She didn't react. Didn't deny it. She just kept moving. By midday, they reached the edge of a ravine. The target site lay below, a cluster of makeshift structures nestled against the frozen cliff face. Smoke curled from a few chimneys, faint but visible. Rostova crouched behind a rock, scanning through binoculars. Looks quiet, too quiet. Chun checked his monitor. Thermals show movement inside the main structure. 6, maybe 7 signatures. Davis adjusted his scope. "That's them. Looks like they've got a comms tower patched into an old satellite uplink. They're running data for sure." Rostova nodded. "We'll move at night. For now, observation post." Anna found a perch on the high ridge, lying flat, rifle steady, scope aimed. She adjusted for distance, then for wind. The calculations weren't numbers anymore, they were instincts. Her finger brushed the trigger, not pressing, just feeling. Her world narrowed again. Wind, dust, gravity, silence. But this time, something felt off. A pressure, a current. Like the mountain was whispering different. She frowned slightly, lifting her head. Across the ravine, something glinted, faint, metallic, gone in an instant. A reflection. A lens. Not theirs. She blinked once, steady, calm. Then quietly said, "Captain, we're not alone." Rostova froze. "Say again." Anna's voice was barely a whisper. "Counter-sniper, northeast ridge, 2,000 meters." Davis instinctively dropped low, heart hammering. "You sure?" Anna adjusted the focus. "Positive." "Can you take him?" Rostova asked. Anna's hand slid to the bolt, calm as breath. "If he doesn't move first." Through the scope, the glint vanished. Then a faint puff of dust, 2 meters from her position. A shot. "Contact!" Chun shouted. The air exploded with the crack of supersonic rounds. Stone splintered inches from Anna's arm. Rostova ducked behind cover. Everyone down, returned fire. Anna didn't move. She was already scanning, tracking. The second shot came closer, whispering past her ear. And then she saw him. A shape against the snow, a flash of movement. The rifle familiar. Too familiar. Her breath caught. It was hers. Her old rifle from Zagros, the one she'd lost in the storm, the one she thought buried forever. Now aimed at her. She exhaled slowly, the wind howling around her. Some ghosts, it seemed, didn't stay buried. The first bullet missed her by less than the width of a breath. The second carved stone, where her face had been a heartbeat earlier. Anna slid backward behind the ridge, movements calm, measured. No panic, only adjustment. "Counter-sniper northeast crest," she said, voice flat through comms. "Roughly 2,200 out, elevation 70 meters above our line." Rostova was already barking orders. "Chun, smoke ready. Davis, set alternate glassing point west, move." But Anna stayed where she was, flattening her body against the cold rock. The wind tore across the slope, dragging snow and grit through the air. The world narrowed to light, motion, geometry. "He has my rifle," she thought. The truth sat in her chest like ice. The angle, the muzzle flash, the recoil signature, she'd know it anywhere. Zagros hadn't just taken her friends. Someone had walked away with her weapon. And now he'd brought it home. Through the scope she caught a shimmer of mirage, heat dancing off metal. He was smart, using the same wind she was reading, timing his shots between gusts. She smiled faintly. So you learned from the best. Chun, she whispered, give me wind call on the ridge line. 35 knots left to right, dropping to 20 halfway across. Gusts irregular. She adjusted elevation, half a click, then another. The math slid together like old bones fitting back into place. Rostova's voice came in hard. Sergeant, we need him neutralized before extraction. Can you? I can, Anna said, cutting her off. The captain hesitated then. You've got 10 minutes before air cover. Won't need it. She shifted forward, rifle snug against her shoulder. Every motion was deliberate, no wasted breath, no wasted strength. Her heartbeat slowed until it matched the rhythm of the wind. Across the ravine, the opposing shooter exhaled and fired again. The round shrieked past, slamming into a rock near Chun's position. Davis ducked, shouting, he's walking rounds on us. Not on us, Anna murmured, on me. Then move, Davis hissed. She didn't. Instead, she looked through the scope again and saw him. A silhouette crouched behind jagged shale. Broad shoulders, calm posture. He moved like someone who understood patience. And when he shifted, she saw the mark burned into the rifle stock, her initials, A.S., scratched and half erased. Her breath left her body. For a moment, memory drowned everything. Snow. A man's voice through static. Wind's a liar, Anna. Rafik. The realization struck like recoil. Her spotter from Zagros, the one listed KIA. But if he'd lived, then who had she mourned all these years? She forced herself back into focus. Emotion was wind. Let it move through, not against. Contact confirmed, Chun said, tone clipped. We've got his range. Anna's voice was quiet. No, you don't. What do you mean? She's reading the air, Davis said softly. He's using her old data. It's a mirror match. Chun frowned. You're saying he knows her corrections. Knows them, Anna said, built from them. For the first time, doubt crept in. Not fear of dying, but fear of failing truth. If this was Rafik, then this wasn't just an enemy. It was her own reflection, trained, betrayed, reborn. She steadied her breathing again. The rifle became weightless in her hands. You taught me to trust the wind, she remembered him saying. And maybe that's why he'd survived, because he learned to betray it. Another flash, another shot. Stone erupted near her scope, dust stinging her eyes. She blinked once, calmly wiped the lens, and shifted 3 meters downslope. The movement was invisible from across the canyon. Chun whispered, he'll expect a counterangle. He'll expect everything, Anna said, so we give him something he can't measure. She removed her glove, pressed bare skin to the rock, feeling for vibration, for rhythm. The mountain spoke through her palm, gust cycles, pressure breaks, the faint metallic ring of distant thunder. Then she closed her eyes. For 5 slow seconds, she didn't see the scope at all. She listened. To the wind. To the ghost of his breath somewhere across the ice. And when she opened them again, she knew exactly where he was. Spotter, she said softly. Copy. Mark ridge point delta, 35 degrees, second outcrop below the crest. Got it. That's him. Chun swallowed. How can you tell? Because the mountain stopped breathing there. He looked once through the glass, and sure enough, a faint shimmer, the heat of a human form against the snow. Confirmed, he breathed. Then we end it. Anna adjusted the rifle. Her old weapon's twin stared back at her from the other ridge. She imagined him doing the same, 2 mirrors waiting for the wind to blink first. She murmured almost to herself, you should have stayed dead, Rafik. The duel stretched into stillness. Seconds became minutes, minutes became eternity. Every gust was a possible shot, every lull a trap. Davis whispered, how long can 2 people stare at each other through scopes? Chun answered quietly, until one forgets to breathe. And then faint movement, the glint of glass shifting. Anna's finger found the trigger. She exhaled half her air. The wind shifted, 30 knots to 28, veering 3 degrees. Her mind calculated automatically. Drop, drift, time of flight. She fired. The rifle's recoil nudged her shoulder like memory. 3 seconds of silence followed. Then impact. A puff of crimson on the far ridge. The opposing rifle clattered sideways, sliding into snow. Davis exhaled so hard it became a laugh. Hit, direct hit. But Anna didn't celebrate. She stayed on the scope watching. The body wasn't still. The man crawled sideways, dragging himself behind cover, leaving a smear of blood like a signature. Target wounded, Chun confirmed. Still active. Rostova's voice crackled through comms. Leave him. We're pulling out. Air support inbound. Anna's jaw tightened. Negative. Sergeant, that's an order. He has my rifle, Anna said, and my dead. Rostova paused, realizing this wasn't about vengeance. It was about closure. You've got 5 minutes, she said finally. Anna rose into a crouch, slinging her pack. Davis reached out instinctively. You're not going down there alone. She gave him one look. It said you couldn't follow even if you tried. Then she slipped over the edge, descending through wind and shadow. The snow crunched under her boots as she crossed the ravine. The world had gone soundless except for the echo of rotor blades miles away. Blood drops marked a trail between boulders. She followed slowly, rifle raised, each step deliberate. When she found him, he was half sitting against a rock, one hand clamped over his shoulder. His breath came in white bursts. The TAC-50, her TAC-50, lay across his knees. For a moment, neither spoke. Then the man looked up, smile faint under cracked lips. Still trust the wind. Her chest tightened. Rafik. He laughed softly, coughed blood. You always were faster. She lowered her rifle slightly but didn't step closer. You were dead. Almost, he rasped. Storm buried me, found by locals. The brass thought one body was enough for the report. Why come back like this? He tilted his head. Because they turned me into a myth, and myths need balance. He tapped the rifle beside him. You took the shot that saved a hostage. I took the shot that started a war. Seems fair we end each other, doesn't it? Her eyes darkened. You think this is balance? No, he whispered. This is gravity. He coughed again, the sound wet. They're using your numbers, Anna, the algorithms you built. I tried to stop them. That's why they sent you here. They wanted Kestrel to finish the cleanup. She froze. Who's they? He smiled faintly, eyes glassy. You'll see, higher than Thorne, higher than any of us. Then his head slumped forward. Silence. The wind shifted, tugging at his hair. Snow began to fall again, thin, ghostly flakes. Anna stood there for a long moment, staring at the rifle in his lap, the same weapon that had once been hers. She knelt, pried it gently from his grasp, and ran her fingers along the initials carved into the stock. The metal was cold, heavy, familiar. She whispered, "Trust the wind." Then she ejected the magazine, cleared the chamber, and set the rifle beside him. A soldier should die with his weapon. By the time she climbed back to the ridge, the sky had turned iron gray. Helicopters circled above, rotors carving the mist. Davis met her halfway, panting, "You got him." She nodded once. Rostova looked at her, eyes searching. "You okay?" Anna wiped a smear of blood from her cheek, not hers. "I will be." The captain exhaled. "Then let's go home." The flight back was silent. The mountains receded into haze. No one spoke, but all of them felt the weight in her silence, the kind of stillness that comes only after something has been buried properly. Chun glanced at her once, then back out the window. Who was he? A friend, she said, once. No one asked more. When the base came into view, Thorne's voice came through comms. Talon 1, report. Rostova answered, mission complete, primary target neutralized, secondary resolved. There was a pause. Understood, Thorne said. Debrief at 1600. Anna closed her eyes. The hum of the engines faded into the sound of the wind, her eternal companion. That night she stood again at the edge of the perimeter wall. The canyon stretched below like an ocean of shadow. She reached into her pouch and pulled out a new casing, still warm from today's shot. It joined the other two she'd polished before. 3 shells now. 3 truths. She held them in her palm, felt their weight. Each one a decision. Each one a life. Each one a reminder that even silence has recoil. She placed them back carefully, zipped the pouch closed, and looked toward the mountains where ghosts slept under snow. The wind pressed against her face, cold, constant, alive. And she whispered to it, almost tenderly, "Still a liar." The wind didn't answer. It didn't need to. The report was written in silence. 3 pages of clean language for something that had nearly broken the sky. At 1600 hours, Sergeant Anna Sharma stood in the debrief tent beneath the humming fluorescent lights. The air smelled of dust and coffee and the faint oil from their rifles. Across the table sat Captain Rostova, Chun, Davis, and General Thorne, who hadn't spoken since they'd walked in. The holographic display projected the valley from earlier that day. Blue outlines of terrain, red markers where the remnant camp had been, one pulsing dot where Rafik had fallen. Thorne's voice, when it came, was quiet. "Mission complete," he read aloud from the report. 0 friendly casualties, 1 hostile neutralized. He looked up. "That's a polite way to say you killed a ghost, Sergeant." Anna didn't answer. She stood at ease, hands behind her back, expression unreadable. Thorne exhaled through his nose. "Intel confirms your identification. Lieutenant Karim Rafik, presumed KIA in Zagros, recruited 3 years ago by a covert division operating outside standard command." He let the sentence hang. No insignia, no name, just Division 9. Ever heard of it? Anna's gaze stayed steady. "I thought Division 9 was a rumor." Thorne gave a small, grim smile. "So did I until this morning." He tapped the display. Lines of encrypted data scrolled upward. "We pulled fragments from the remnant servers before the airstrike erased them. Transmission logs mention a project code, Kestrel, not you, not the call sign, something bigger." Rostova frowned. "You're saying they used her name as an operation?" Thorne nodded. "Or as a blueprint." Davis shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, what kind of blueprint?" Thorne didn't look at him. "Ballistics modeling, predictive targeting, the same algorithms Sergeant Sharma built during Zagros, only now modified." Anna's jaw tightened. "How modified?" "Enough that they don't need a sniper anymore," Thorne said quietly. "They're teaching machines to make the same calculations you do." The words hit the tent like a cold wind. Rostova muttered, "Automated overwatch, autonomous fire control." Chun shook his head slowly. "They want to replace instinct." Thorne nodded. "And they used your data to start." Silence. Anna said nothing. She felt something heavy stir in her chest, not anger exactly, something colder, something like recognition. The meeting broke an hour later. Rostova and the others left for the mess hall. Thorne stayed behind, staring at the map long after the hologram shut off. When Anna turned to leave, he said, "Stay a moment." She stopped. He didn't look at her right away. His voice was low. "You ever think about what happens when people like you stop being human and start being equations?" She didn't respond. He continued, "I used to believe strength was a man's spine or the size of his courage. But you showed me it's neither. It's focus, precision, stillness." He looked up now. "And the people funding Division 9, they're trying to bottle that." Anna's tone was calm. "They can't. They'll find out instinct does replicate. Thorne smiled sadly. They don't care if it fails, they care if it sells. He rubbed his temple. You realize what this means. The shot you took on that ridge, the miracle everyone talks about, it isn't just legend anymore. It's data, and someone's using it. Anna's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes darkened. Then we find them. Not so easy, Thorne said. Command wants this buried. They'll declassify the footage, call it training material, and pretend the rest never happened. Why, she asked. Because admitting they lost control of one of their ghosts makes them mortal. He met her gaze, and they hate that. Later that night, the mess hall was nearly empty. The storm outside had returned, the kind that made the tin roof hum and the generator lights flicker. Chun and Davis sat at a corner table, mugs of coffee steaming between them. Davis stared at his reflection in the surface. You ever think maybe we shouldn't be here? Chun raised an eyebrow. Here as in this base or here as in existence? Both, Davis said. He stopped, glancing toward the far side of the hall where Anna sat alone cleaning her rifle again. She makes it look like all of this matters, and then you realize she doesn't even want it to. Chun nodded slowly. That's the difference between soldiers and legends. Legends don't have homes. Neither do ghosts, Davis muttered. They drank in silence for a while. Rostova entered, carrying a file. Commands requesting immediate submission of all after-action logs, she said, sitting beside them. They want the drone footage too. Chun frowned, all of it. Every second, she said, even the part where she took the shot. Davis hesitated. That footage belongs to her. Rostova's voice hardened. Nothing belongs to anyone out here, Corporal. But, orders, she said, then softer. You think I like it. They're going to use it, Davis. That's what they do. He looked at her helplessly. Use it how? Rostova didn't answer. Outside, the wind rattled the hangar doors. Anna stepped out of the mess into the cold. She didn't need to hear the conversation to know what it was about. The truth always echoed before it reached her. She walked to the edge of the airstrip, watching the faint orange glow of the perimeter lights. The mountains loomed black beyond them, shapeless giants waiting for her next move. She felt the pouch at her belt, the 3 casings inside, each one a piece of her history, each one a reminder that perfection was never free. She closed her hand around them until the edges pressed into her skin. The metal was cold, real, grounding. Then a voice broke the quiet. Sergeant. She turned. Davis stood a few meters away, collar pulled up against the wind. You're supposed to be asleep, she said. He shrugged, couldn't. He stepped closer. General says they're sending the footage to command. Thought you'd want to know. She nodded once. I expected that. You don't seem angry. I don't waste energy on what I can't change. He hesitated. What if you could? She looked at him, really looked, and saw the question underneath. The moral one. The one soldiers only ask when they start to think again. Then I'd have to decide what kind of enemy they want me to be, she said softly. Davis swallowed hard. You really think they'd turn that data into a weapon? She gave a faint, humorless smile. Everything's a weapon if you hold it right. He nodded, quiet, thoughtful, then almost reluctantly said, I used to think shooting straight was enough. She studied him for a moment, then said, It never is. The wind shifted, cold across their faces. Somewhere far off, thunder rolled, or maybe it was artillery from another mountain range. Hard to tell in this world. Davis said quietly, If they come after you. They won't, she interrupted. How can you be sure? Because they already have, she said. They just don't know it yet. The next morning, Thorne received a coded message from Central Command. The words were simple, sterile. Asset Kestrel reassigned for evaluation and debrief at Division HQ. Immediate transport authorized. He read it twice before saying anything. Rostova stood across the desk. They're pulling her. Thorne nodded slowly, effective immediately. Chun's voice came from the doorway. She doesn't even know yet. Thorne's jaw clenched. Then let's keep it that way until I decide what to do. Rostova frowned. Sir, that's a direct order. Thorne looked up, and for the first time there was something fierce in his eyes, something almost defiant. So was sending her into the canyon with a death sentence. You see how that turned out. No one spoke. He turned back to the screen, muttering to himself, they think she's data. They think they can measure her. Then louder, but they don't understand what kind of wind they're walking into. That evening, Anna found Thorne on the flight line, watching the last helicopter settle into its bay. Sir, she said. He didn't turn immediately. They want you back in the capital. She waited. I haven't answered yet, he added. Why? Because I think they're done studying you. And when men like that finish studying something, they either lock it up or destroy it. She looked at him steadily. Then what are you going to do? Thorne's eyes met hers. What I should have done a long time ago, protect the soldier, not the myth. He handed her a sealed envelope. If I can't stop them, this is your exit. Coordinates, transport codes, safe houses. You disappear until the world forgets you again. Anna took it, the paper rough beneath her gloves. Running isn't my style, sir, she said. He almost smiled. Neither is waiting to be hunted. The wind picked up, whipping dust around them. The helicopter rotors thumped, echoing like a heartbeat. Whatever you decide, Thorne said quietly, remember legends die faster than soldiers, and I'd rather you live. She nodded once. Thank you, General. He nodded back, eyes heavy. Go clean your rifle, Sergeant, you'll need it. That night Anna didn't sleep. She sat by her cot, the envelope unopened beside her. The lamp threw a thin circle of light over her hands. She opened the pouch and took out the 3 casings again, lined them on the table in a row. Then slowly, she took a pen and marked the 4th space empty. There would be another. There was always another. She looked out the narrow window, where the storm clouds rolled like waves over the peaks. Somewhere out there, Division 9 was already moving. And somewhere behind them, men like Thorne were deciding whether conscience still had a place in war. She whispered to herself, a breath, a vow. Let them try to measure the wind. The storm arrived before the soldiers did. Always does. Wind clawed at the valley, turning snow into shrapnel. Visibility 30 meters at best, the kind of weather that swallows men whole. Anna moved fast but not rushed. She learned long ago that panic makes noise and noise is death. Her pack was light: rifle, thermal blanket, 2 rations, the envelope Thorne gave her. That was all. No tracker, no beacon. The fewer signals, the better. Behind her, the base lights were fading into the storm. In front of her, nothing but black. She paused once at the ridge to look back. For a moment, the wind cleared, just enough for her to see the faint shape of the hangars below, glowing like ghosts under floodlights. Then they were gone. 12 kilometers away, General Thorne stood inside the command center, watching the radar screens blur with interference. Signal's gone, said the comms officer. Either she's dead or she's smart. Thorne didn't answer. He already knew which. Captain Rostova entered, soaked with sleet. They're here, she said. Division 9, 2 gunships, 6 ground vehicles, no insignia. Thorne nodded slowly. Of course. The officer looked up, confused. Sir, authorization came straight from the capital. I know where it came from, Thorne snapped. His hand curled into a fist. Get everyone not essential off the base. Now. Rostova hesitated. You're not going to hand her over. Thorne turned toward her. Would you? No, she said, but I outrank fewer people than you do. He gave a faint smile. Then we're both about to lose something. The gunships landed hard on the tarmac, their rotors kicking up ice and dust. The men who stepped out weren't regular army. Their uniforms were matte black, unmarked, their movements perfectly synchronized. Division 9, the kind of soldiers who didn't exist on paper. The lead operative removed his hood, revealing a smooth, calm face that had never known hesitation. "General Thorne," he said, voice precise, practiced. "We're here for Sergeant Sharma." Thorne met his gaze. "She's gone." The operative didn't blink. "Then we'll find her." "You won't," Thorne said evenly. "You're chasing the wind." The operative's lips curved slightly. "Wind can be tracked. It leaves patterns, signatures." He signaled to his men. "Lock down the perimeter. Interrogate everyone. Anyone who helped her leaves in a body bag." Rostova stepped forward. "You're trespassing on a NATO installation." The operative looked at her calmly. "No, Captain, you're trespassing on a secret." Thorne's hand fell on his holster. "You want to make this official." The man smiled thinly. "No, General, I want to make it clean." For a moment, the room was silent except for the hum of equipment and the moan of wind outside. Then Thorne said quietly, "Get off my base." Anna was still climbing when the first drones appeared. She heard them before she saw them, the faint mechanical buzz blending with the storm. She ducked beneath a rock shelf, pressed her back to the frozen wall, and held her breath. Infrared beams swept the ridge. The drones hovered, searching. She waited until the red dots passed across the snow beside her boot, then vanished. Only when the sound faded did she move again. Every step was calculation, every breath measured. Her body knew this rhythm. It was the same as shooting, just slower. She reached a narrow crevice between two cliffs, just wide enough for one person. Crawling through, she emerged into a hollow basin shielded from the worst of the wind. There she stopped. For the first time since she left the base, she allowed herself to breathe. She opened the envelope Thorne had given her. Inside, a map fragment, a code phrase, and a small metal drive, smooth, heavy, blank. Stamped on it was a single word: mirror. She frowned. "What did you give me, Thorne?" The wind didn't answer. Back at the base, Thorne faced Division 9's lead operative again. "You think she's running?" the man asked. "She's not, she's repositioning, there's a difference." Thorne said nothing. The operative stepped closer. "Where does she go when she disappears, General?" Thorne's eyes narrowed. "You're assuming she told me." "She didn't need to," the man said. "You did." He handed Thorne a data pad. On it, satellite footage, a heat signature moving through the mountains. Thorne's jaw tightened. "You've been tracking her since before she left." The operative smiled. "We've been tracking you." Thorne didn't speak for a long moment. Then very quietly he said, "You should stop." "Why?" "Because you're about to find out what happens when you corner something that doesn't know how to surrender." The operative tilted his head. "Is that a threat?" "No," Thorne said. "That's a weather forecast." Snow buried the valley. Night fell fast, smothering the landscape in shadow. Anna built a fire under an overhang, the smallest flame possible, just enough for warmth, not light. She ate half a ration, drank snowmelt from her canteen, and studied the map fragment again. It pointed toward an abandoned outpost, 40 kilometers west, code name Helix. Old NATO site, decommissioned years ago. Rumor said it was used to test remote weapon systems. Maybe that's why Thorne sent her there, maybe not. She lay back against the cold stone, eyes half closed. For a moment she imagined what normal people did after missions. Sleep, maybe, or dream. But she couldn't sleep. Her mind replayed Rafik's last words. "They're using your numbers." She wondered if Division 9 even needed her alive anymore, or if her death would make her data more valuable. The wind shifted outside, a sound distant, rhythmic, rotors. She extinguished the fire instantly. The darkness swallowed her. The hum grew louder. She slid her rifle into position, lying flat, the scope glinting faintly. Through the lens she saw it, a drone carrier, hovering just above the tree line. A spotlight swept the ground like a slow heartbeat. She tracked it with calm precision. When the beam neared her position, she didn't move, not a breath. The light passed, faded. Only then did she whisper to herself, "You can't measure silence." At the base, chaos was spreading. Rostova and Chun were detained in the comms wing. Davis was missing. Thorne stood in his office as 2 Division 9 soldiers tore through his desk drawers. The lead operative said casually, "You know what I admire about you, General. You still believe loyalty has a face." Thorne leaned against the wall, hands behind his back. "And you believe loyalty is data." The operative looked up. "Data doesn't lie." Thorne smiled faintly. "Neither does the wind, but you still can't catch it." At that, the operative stopped searching. His tone cooled. "Where is she?" Thorne's eyes hardened. "Somewhere you can't follow." The man stepped closer, voice dropping. "If you're protecting her, it's treason." "If I'm protecting her," Thorne said, "then maybe treason's the only honest thing left." In the mountains, Anna reached the remains of Outpost Helix by dawn. The storm had eased. What remained was silence, the kind that only comes after everything stops moving. The structure was half buried in snow, steel twisted and rusted. She forced open the door, descended into the dark. Her flashlight beam cut through dust and frost, revealing old control panels, cables, and a dead terminal. She found a power switch, flipped it, nothing. Then she remembered the drive mirror. She slid it into the console. The screen flickered once, then again, and came alive. Data spilled across it. Schematics, firing simulations, neural models, all stamped with her name. Kestrel Project version 9.3. She scrolled deeper. Test subjects, coordinates. One line froze her blood. Subject 1, Rafik Karim deceased. Subject 2, Anna Sharma active. Status, behavioral pattern replication, 91%. Her reflection stared back from the monitor. The code pulsed around her name. She whispered, "They weren't training snipers, they were cloning instincts." The terminal beeped. A message popped up on the screen. "Incoming transmission, Division 9 command." She stepped back, heart pounding once, then steady again. The screen crackled. A voice came through, cold and calm. "Sergeant Sharma, you were never meant to see this. Return the drive, we'll make it painless." She didn't respond. The voice continued, "You belong to us now, you always did." Anna raised her rifle and aimed it at the screen. "No," she said softly. "You built something that looked like me, but it will never be me." And she pulled the trigger. The screen shattered, sparks burst across the room, the lights died. Back at the base, alarms sounded. Division 9 systems glitched simultaneously, satellite feeds went dark, comms scrambled. The lead operative stared at the monitor. What did she do? Thorne watched, unblinking. She broke the mirror. The man turned sharply. "You knew she'd find Helix." Thorne nodded once. "That's why I gave her the map." "Do you understand what she just destroyed?" "Better than you do," Thorne said. "You were trying to recreate her instinct, but you forgot instinct fights back." The operative's voice dropped to a whisper. "Then we'll burn everything." Thorne stepped forward, eyes steel. "You already have." In the mountains, the outpost began to hum, faint, deep vibrations shaking the floor. The backup reactors were overheating. Anna grabbed her pack and ran, snow spraying behind her boots. The storm had cleared. The sky above was blindingly bright. Behind her, a pulse of light burst through the clouds as the outpost detonated, a silent bloom of white swallowing the horizon. She stopped on a ridge, breath misting in the cold air. The explosion's echo rolled for miles. In her hand, the pouch of casings felt heavier than ever. She looked at them one last time, then dropped one into the snow. A fourth mark. A new truth. Far below in the burning ruin, data melted into smoke. Division 9's secrets turned to ash. And somewhere, Thorne's voice, faint, distant, carried by the wind, whispered what he'd always known. You can't own what was born in silence. The blast rolled through the mountains like thunder, remembering its name. By the time the echo died, snow was falling again, soft, weightless, erasing footprints, burning edges, everything. Anna stood on the ridge and watched the cloud rise from what used to be Helix. For a long time she didn't move. There was nothing left to run from now. Only the wind, carrying the last pieces of a secret that had tried to own her. She knelt, brushed frost from a patch of stone, and placed the pouch of casings there. 4 shells, 4 truths. She whispered, "That's enough," and let the wind take the words. Then she started walking. 2 days later, a convoy wound through the same valley. Division 9 was gone, or pretending to be. All that remained were blackened husks and silence. In the lead truck, General Thorne sat beside Captain Rostova. The map on his lap showed static where Helix had been. "She really did it," Rostova murmured. Thorne nodded once. She didn't just destroy a program, she deleted their certainty. Chun's voice came over the radio. No heat signatures, just debris. Thorne exhaled. "Good, leave it that way." Rostova glanced at him. "What happens now?" He folded the map, tucked it into his coat. Now the story changes hands. Night again. Somewhere beyond the border, a small cabin waited in the tree line, one of Thorne's old safe houses from the war nobody claimed to have fought. Anna found it by instinct, not by map. Inside, the air smelled of dust and cedar. There was a cot, a lantern, a tin of coffee so old it had turned to powder. She lit the lantern and sat at the table. Her hands trembled for the first time in years, not from fear, but from release. Every mission she'd survived had left a mark she couldn't name. Tonight they all surfaced at once. She poured snow into a pot, set it on the stove, waited for it to melt. The hiss filled the silence. She closed her eyes. Rafik's face, Thorne's words, Davis's quiet awe, the mountain breathing between heartbeats. All of it drifted through her mind, like static that no longer hurt. When the water boiled, she turned off the flame and just listened to it settle. That sound, quiet, ordinary, felt like mercy. At dawn she stepped outside. The forest was glassed with ice, every branch shone. A fox crossed her path, pausing just long enough to study her before vanishing. For the first time she smiled without effort. In the distance, helicopters muttered across the horizon, but none were looking for her. She was already a story. Command would package the explosion as an equipment malfunction. The myth of Kestrel would live on, easier to believe than the woman who'd caused it. She sat on a fallen log, took out her notebook and began to write, not a report, not data, just words. Fragments, wind speeds, names, regrets. Halfway down the page she stopped and wrote a single line. Dignity doesn't shout, it simply acts. Then she closed the notebook, tore out the page, and burned it in the cold morning air. Back at the base, Thorne faced a tribunal that wasn't a tribunal, 3 men in suits, no flags, no ranks. One asked, "Where is the asset?" Thorne said, "Gone. Destroyed." He met the man's eyes, freed. They exchanged glances. "You've compromised national research." "I've corrected it." The oldest of them leaned forward. "Do you know what you've done, General?" "Yes," Thorne said quietly. "I've reminded you what happens when you build machines to imitate conscience. You forget how to have one." They dismissed him that afternoon, stripped his clearance, grounded his career. He didn't argue. When he walked out of the compound gates, he felt lighter than he had in decades. Rostova waited by a jeep. "Where will you go?" He looked toward the mountains, "Wherever the wind decides." Weeks passed. The story of the Helix incident spread in fragments. A systems failure, a rogue program, a missing sniper who'd gone dark. Every version disagreed, which meant all of them were true somewhere. Davis stayed on base a little longer, but something in him had changed. He trained recruits now quietly, patiently, teaching them to listen before they fired. When one of them asked where he learned that, he smiled and said, "From a woman who once argued with the wind and won." Chun left the service altogether, bought a small mechanic shop in the city, fixed things that still needed human hands. He never talked about Helix, but every winter when snow started falling sideways, he'd look east and murmur, "Still waiting, Kestrel." One evening, Thorne received an unmarked package, no return address. Inside, wrapped in cloth, was a single brass casing and a note written in thin, steady handwriting. "For the fifth truth, keep it safe." He turned the casing over in his palm. On its rim, etched with a knife, were 3 letters, a SW. Anna Sharma, wind. He smiled, a small, tired smile, and placed it on his desk beside the others he'd kept from old wars. Somewhere out there she was still alive. That was enough. Snow again, different mountain, same silence. Anna walked along a ridge overlooking the borderlands. Below her, the world glittered with frost. She stopped at a spot where the wind changed direction, the invisible line between nations and memories. She unslung her rifle, wiped the scope clean, and looked through it one last time. Not at an enemy, just at the horizon. Through the glass she saw movement. A village waking, smoke curling from chimneys, a child chasing a dog through snow. Ordinary life, something she defended without ever getting to live. She lowered the rifle and rested it across her knees. A voice, her own, whispered inside her head, "You can stop now." She listened to that silence for a long time. Then she smiled, small and real. Night fell quietly. She built a small fire, not to hide it this time. The flames threw long shadows on the snow, turning her shape into something almost human again. She took out the remaining casings, placed them beside the fire, and added the fifth one Thorne now held in spirit. 5 marks, 5 lessons. She didn't need to name them, but she knew what they were. Loss, precision, defiance, mercy, truth. She whispered each word once, letting it disappear into the crackle of the fire. When the flames died, she stood, brushed the ashes from her hands, and turned toward the dark. There would be no trail, no body, no ending to write. Only a woman, the wind, and whatever peace hides between them. Voiceover, final lines. They called her a legend. But legends are just the shapes we draw around silence. She was never the myth they wanted, only the proof that stillness can fight back. And when history tried to claim her, she walked into the wind. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. The screen fades to white. A single casing rolls across the snow, stops beside a boot print, and glints once in the sunlight before the wind covers it.